Here we are with the eighth group, which is volume. Okay, so these are geometric measurements, but volume. So let's see what we can do with this one. Okay, so this is the most benign of the cases. So 4 by 5 by 6. So it's always good to draw them out if you can. So you say the dimensions are, it's called 4 by 5 by 6. So if you imagined what was one layer be, well, one layer would be 4 by 5, so you'd have 20 on the layer, and you'd have 6 layers. So you have 120 centimeters cubed, or cubic centimeters. In this next one, it's slightly more complicated because you've got, instead of just whole numbers, you have fractions, but same thing. So just draw yourself a picture. So we'll say, oh, it's 4.5 by 5.5 by 2. But remember, although you're multiplying everything together, you don't have to multiply them in order. And so when I look at this, I say to myself, what would I like to multiply together best? And I definitely multiply the 2 with one of these others. So I'm going to choose to multiply it with the 4.5. So 2 times 4.5 equals 9. Right? 2 times 4 is 8. 2 times a half is 1. 8 plus 1 is 9. So now I have 5.5 times 9. But remember, we can split that into 5 plus a half times 9. So 9 times 5 is 45. 9 times a half is 9 halves. But that's like 45 plus 4.5. 9 halves is 4.5. So that would give us 49.5. Here's the case that I was warning you about, where it's a half an inch. The block is half an inch. Okay, so you have two ways to do this. So let's draw the first way. So you have a 4 by 5 by 6. So you say, okay, it's 4 by 5 by 6, but how much is this really? Well, if it's half inches, 4 times a half inch equals 2 inches. This is 2. So then this one is 5 times a half. So that's 2.5, or 5 halves. And this one equals 6 times a half equals 3. So now we have 2 times 2.5. Sorry about that. 2 times 2.5 times 3. So let's do these two first. 2 times 2.5 is 5. 5 times 3 equals 15. Okay, so that's one way to do it. It's always good to have multiple ways to do it, though. So let's think about it a little bit more. If you have a cube that's a half by a half by a half, let's just draw that out. So it's a half by a half by a half. What's the volume of that cube? So it's a half by a half by a half. Well, we multiply that together. We get 1/2 times 1/2 times 1/2 equals an eighth. So each of these cubes that we're making, right? So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so we got 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Each of these cubic things, how much is it? Well, it's an eighth of a cubic inch. So what we could do instead is we could say, we'll multiply these together, so 4 times 5 times 6. So altogether there's 120 cubes, but then we multiply by 8. So we have to, or we divide, in other words, we divide by 8. We also get 15. Why? Because the 120 cubes each is just an eighth. So in this one, we know that our cube is a volume of 27. Well, working backwards, so if volume equals 27, basically you're saying what times itself twice, so what cubed, n times n times n, so if the side is n times n equals 27. And if you don't know, you just say, well, 1 cubed, 1 times 1 equals 1, 2 cubed equals 8, and 3 cubed, 3 times equals 3 times 3 times 3, 3 times 3 equals 27. So we say, okay, this is 3 on a side, n equals 3. Well, what's going to happen next? We're going to double everything, double the length, width, and height. So we're going to double it. So if we do that, instead of a 3 by 3 by 3, now we're going to have a 6 by 6 by 6. Okay, so 6 times 6 times 6 equals 36 times 6, 216. Okay. And so what's the volume going to be? The volume will be 216 units. So in this problem, it's basically just one of seeing that you need to divide things up. The other issue here is that you have inches instead of feet. So let's make it easier on ourselves. So 8 inches is how much in feet? It's 2/3 of a foot. It's 8 out of 12, which is like 2/3. 6 inches is a half of a foot. It's 6 out of 12. So having that, now we've got a little bit easier time. Okay, so let's divide this guy up. So this top portion here is 2/3 wide times a half tall, and then 3 feet across times 3. Okay. And we'll figure that out in a second. So what about the next one? Well, the next one is also 3 across, but this time it's 2/3 and 2/3. Okay, so 8 inches and 8 inches. So it's 4/3. And then what about the height? Still a half times 3. And the last one is 8 inches plus 8 inches plus 8 inches. So it is 2 feet across, so 6/3 across. It's still a half high times 3. Okay, so there's different ways that you could do this, but you can see that some of them are fairly easy to do. So let's just do it this way. So this would be 2 times 1 half is 1 times 3. So this would be 3 units. This would be 4/3 times a half is 4/6. So it would be 4/6 times 3, which equals 12/6, which equals 2, 3, 2. And now we suspect maybe the top is 1. So this is 2/6. So this is 2/6. 2/6 times 3, which equals 1. So we add these together, we have a 1, a 2, and a 3, so we get 6 altogether.